Have you ever noticed? There are people who move through the world quietly, yet they leave ripples in places they've never even touched. They don't rush, they don't beg for attention, they don't fight to prove themselves in every room they enter. They simply are. She is one of them. Not because life spared her pain, but because pain taught her something most people will never learn. That peace is more valuable than presence. That solitude is not an empty space, but a sanctuary you build brick by brick. Out of every disappointment, every betrayal, every moment you are forced to stand alone. The world sees her and wonders, why is she alone? But they ask from a place of misunderstanding. They think being alone is a state of lacking. They think it means no one wanted you, or you failed at keeping someone. They don't realize, she walked away.
Not out of fear. Not out of weakness.
But out of loyalty, to herself. She didn't start out this way. Once, she too believed the stories we are all told. That you must be chosen to have worth. That love is something you earn by bending yourself into shapes that please others. That a woman's happiness lives in someone else's eyes. And so she tried. She gave. She smiled when she wanted to cry. She forgave when she should have walked away. She shrank herself to fit into boxes she was never meant to live in. And for a while, it worked. People loved her, or at least, they loved the version of her that asked for nothing. But deep inside, a quiet truth began to grow, the kind that refuses to stay buried. One day, she realized. Love that demands you lose yourself isn't love. It's hunger. It's need. It's a chain disguised as a ribbon. She began to step back. At first, it was just small things, saying no when every instinct told her to say yes just to keep the peace. Declining invitations that drained her. Choosing to stay home when the world told her she should be out there looking for someone. Then, bigger steps. Ending relationships that were built on dependency instead of trust. Walking away from conversations that turned into negotiations for her worth. Choosing silence over explaining herself to people committed to misunderstanding her. The change wasn't easy. It came with lonely nights, with voices in her head whispering, "You'll end up alone forever." It came with guilt, the kind that creeps in when you've been trained to believe your worth is in giving yourself away. It came with the discomfort of watching people leave, because you no longer played the part they expected. But here's the thing about walking alone. The first steps feel heavy. And then something shifts.
You start to hear yourself again.
Your own laughter, unedited. Your own thoughts, uninterrupted. Your own needs, unashamed. You realize solitude is not the absence of love, it's the presence of self. People around her began to notice. Some admired her. Some feared her. Others criticized her, because her very existence challenged their own choices. "Why are you so picky?" they'd ask. "Why can't you just be more open?
Don't you want someone?"
She'd smile, not the nervous smile of someone caught off guard, but the steady smile of someone who knows exactly who they are. What they called picky was simply her minimum. It took her years to learn that her heart was not a bargaining chip. She wasn't waiting for a perfect person, she was waiting for a real one. Someone who could stand beside her without asking her to step down from herself.
And yes, she still wants love.
But not the kind that drains. Not the kind that silences. Not the kind that makes her smaller so someone else can feel big. She wants a love that arrives already whole. A love that adds instead of taking. A love that sees her not as a rescue mission, but as a companion. Until that comes, she's not afraid to walk alone. Because she's learned something most people never do, that being alone is better than being half-loved. Some people find her intimidating. They don't know what to do with someone who doesn't need them. They're used to love built on dependency, on needing to be needed. But she's rewritten the story. She's built a life where she is not the missing piece, but the whole picture. And in that life, every no she says is not rejection, it's self-respect. Every door she closes is not loss, it's protection. Every step she takes alone is not emptiness, it's expansion. Silence, they say, is not the absence of sound, it's the presence of truth. In the moments when the world stops speaking, when notifications fade and voices grow distant, something inside begins to whisper. It's in that whisper that the deepest revelations are born. The woman in our story had begun to understand this. At first, her solitude felt like exile, a punishment she hadn't earned. Friends had drifted away, relationships had dissolved into polite nods and shallow check-ins, and the world seemed to quietly step aside, as if she was no longer part of the rhythm. But in the quiet, she noticed things she'd never noticed before. The way her own breathing seemed to align with the rustle of leaves outside. The way the sun would spill into her room in shapes that reminded her of old childhood summers. The way she no longer rushed to fill every moment with distraction. This wasn't the loneliness everyone feared. This was discovery. People assume that being alone means something is missing, that life is incomplete until another person steps in to complete it. But here's the truth she learned. Sometimes the space you think is empty is actually full. Full of the things you've been too busy to see. She began to write again. Not for an audience. Not for likes. Not for anyone's validation. She wrote because her thoughts were like restless birds. They needed somewhere to land. Her journal became a place of confessions, of small victories, of truths too sharp to share out loud. And slowly, a shift began. She realized that so much of her life had been shaped around other people's timelines. Their expectations. Their definitions of success, beauty, and love. She had been a character in everyone else's story but her own. Now, she was rewriting the script. And here's the part that unsettles people. When a woman truly begins to live for herself, she becomes unpredictable. Not because she is reckless, but because she stops being easy to control. She starts making choices that don't make sense to those still living in the old script. She says no to things that once felt mandatory. She says yes to paths no one warned her about. It scares people. And maybe that's why they label her as cold, or distant, or difficult. But what they don't see is that this distance is her freedom, and this difficulty is her refusal to shrink back into a role she never agreed to play. This is the transformation no one talks about. When solitude turns from punishment into privilege. When the silence stops feeling empty and starts feeling like home. And yet, even in this newfound peace, there are moments when the past tries to pull her back. Memories, old habits, familiar voices saying, "You're better off with someone." It's tempting, like returning to a warm room after standing outside in the cold. But she knows the cost now. Because once you've seen yourself clearly, without the mirrors others hold up, there's no going back to living blurred. She didn't choose to be alone out of bitterness. She chose it because, for the first time, she wasn't afraid of herself. The silence that followed was not the absence of sound. It was the presence of something else, something heavier, something that spoke without words. The silence that followed was not the absence of sound. It was the presence of something else, something heavier, something that spoke without words. She realized that in life, the most defining moments rarely arrive with fanfare. They come quietly, almost shyly, slipping into your days disguised as ordinary. And yet, those are the moments that change everything. People think growth feels like a burst of energy, a surge of triumph, a moment where the world applauds you. But real growth? It's awkward. It's uncomfortable. It's the slow shedding of skins you once thought were part of you. It's the endless negotiation between who you were and who you are becoming. And most of the time, nobody sees it happening, not even you, until you look back and realize you are no longer the same. She had stopped chasing answers. Answers were overrated anyway. What she sought now were better questions. Questions that didn't close doors but opened new ones. Questions that didn't pretend to solve life, but made it feel richer, deeper, worth living. On long walks, she'd sometimes pause by the edge of the city, where the concrete surrendered to open fields. The air was different there, unfiltered by the noise of ambition. She liked to imagine that every blade of grass was holding a secret the city could never understand. And maybe she was one of those secrets too, meant to exist quietly, without needing the validation of a crowd.